Well, the Greens have introduced a bill to allow for the legalisation of cannabis for personal use in Australia, including licensed Amsterdam-style cannabis cafes, which would be allowed to legally sell marijuana products.
They reckon legalising the drug will cultivate lots of jobs and effectively end the black market. But a Senate committee didn't see it that way. They worried legislation would lead to high rates of use amongst young people and so rejected the proposal.
But many on the left say this is simply delaying the inevitable. Our topic for Head to Head tonight is, should cannabis be made legal?
Well, joining us at the desk is Greens Senator David Shoebridge and former New South Wales Police Minister David Elliott. Welcome, gentlemen. Let's start with you, Senator. Why should cannabis be legalised?
No, I don't think it's a left-right thing. I think, in fact, you see support for legalising cannabis across the political spectrum. But if you wanted to start with getting about 60 to 80,000 people a year out of the criminal justice system because of the possession of cannabis, well, that's a good starter. A lot of those are very vulnerable communities, First Nations communities. If you wanted to take around about $10 billion a year, maybe a bit less, maybe a bit more, out of organised crime and put it into legitimate businesses, have tax paid upon it, create regional jobs, well, you should legalise cannabis. And if you wanted, for the first time ever, to have a product that is well regulated, where you know the strength, you ensure there aren't contaminants in it, a product that millions of Australians already consume. If you wanted to take it out of the hands of bikie gangs and organised crimes being the regulators of cannabis, and nobody would suggest they're good regulators for a product, and you wanted to finally know what you're purchasing, have strict quality controls, know the strength and be able to do it in a safe and regulated way, for all of those reasons, you'd legalise cannabis. In fact, you'd get on and do it as quick as you can.
OK, and David, so on the other end there, as David's just pointed out, getting people out of the justice system, regulating it, is that a good enough argument?
No, that is just complete bullshit, what we've just heard. Cannabis is an illegal drug. It causes schizophrenia. It certainly does create medical problems for the Australian Medical Association. The peak body has told David himself that his bill is dangerous to the health of our children. Now, I don't know if, David, you would allow your children to take cannabis or their friends when they go to your house, but I can assure you there wouldn't be happening in my house.
That's why we have an age limit of 18.
I need to finish.
What a stupid question.
I need to finish.
The bill has an age limit of 18. That's just
We need to... Let me finish. I gave you the courtesy of finishing.
It's not an argument, it's stupid.
But it is not... It is certainly a left versus... It is certainly a left versus right issue. The Labor Party are opposed to it, the National Party are opposed to it, the Liberal Party are opposed to it. The only people that are in favour of it are the Greens, because you need to appeal to that demographic that wants to take drugs. But even the AMA have said to you it causes schizophrenia. It has 3 times the level of tar than cigarette does. And it is, the police will tell you, a gateway drug. The reason why we need people that are taking drugs in the judicial system is so that we can clean them up, because they're not going to be cleaned up going to Greens branch meetings.
Now, that I got to tell you, is some of the most farcical arguments. The idea that putting someone in jail cleans them up or gets them away from drugs. We know, everybody knows that going to jail...
I didn't say put them in jail.
You said the criminal justice system.
Yes,
you put them through the criminal justice
program.
system. You were the police minister and that's your thinking? That you put people in jail to clean them up and get them off drugs? That is a farcical argument. And if you want to stop cannabis being a gateway drug, take it out of the hands of drug dealers and put it in a well-regulated, calm, publicly controlled dispensary. And people will no longer, when they're going for cannabis, be offered a variety of other illegal drugs. And you will get the outcomes we've seen in the United States and Canada, where if you go there, the sky is firmly still up above you. There has been really contested data. Some data says zero growth. Some data says a tiny, tiny growth in cannabis use.
Which data?
Almost entirely the Canadian national data from their public health body.
OK, well, the Australian Medical Association is saying it causes schizophrenia,
but why not look at the Canadian public
health
health data, which shows if there is a small increase in cannabis, it's resulted in a significant reduction in alcohol. And every time you get that, a switch from a marginal increase in cannabis use and a reduction in alcohol use, you have a public health win. Now, you might want to be, an advocate for the alcohol industry. That's fine. Your party's often done that. But what we see here is a less harmful drug, being well regulated, and what really frustrates me...
Well, the AMA disagrees with you, David.
Well,
the Australian Medical Association disagrees with you.
Refused to look at the Canadian data. That's a matter for them. But what we also see, when you have a look at a well-regulated system, You see people knowing what they're going to put in their body. And it means that millions of Australians, about 40% of adults have tried cannabis at one point or another, will finally be able to get a product that's labelled.
David, can I ask you this? Do we want less people using cannabis?
Well, yeah, ideally we'd have less people using cannabis.
So how would legalising it cause less people to use it? Wouldn't it cause more people to use?
But what we see is almost stagnant use rates. So we basically have a choice.
But you're going to supercharge.
We can have... No, but that's not what the data shows. It's just not what the data shows.
Well, it certainly is.
We have a choice of having, millions of Australians trying a legal drug in an unregulated market that pumps billions of dollars into organised crime. That's the status quo. Or we could have a legal market where there will still be millions of people trying cannabis, far safer, far better regulated, which pumps billions of dollars into legitimate businesses and into tax. And we can do things like, if you want to have more police, you could pay for more police. Not my choice. I'd rather see public hospitals and schools. But we'd have billions of dollars to do good.
Yeah. Well, I guess one of the aspects that you've put forward, and I'll get your views on this, is this idea of a cannabis cafe, like what we see in Amsterdam. How would you feel about that, walking past a cafe where you know that they're knowingly selling it?
Why stop with the cafe? Why don't we just have it at home? Would you allow your children to have drugs at home?
I've already told you.
Yes or no?
No, and I've already told you.
So why do you want my kids to get access to it? You're going to allow your children...
You're back on this bizarre argument that a bill that says it's a crime to give anyone cannabis who's under 18. It's a law that says you can't get it if you're under 18.
Would you give your 19-year-old child...
The suggestion that is going to create access for youth getting cannabis. David, perhaps you should wake up and smell the roses and realise young people can already get cannabis in an illegal market where it's controlled by organised crime. It's controlled by organised crime.
Are you going to legalise cocaine and ecstasy
might make it bloody well boring and get a lot of young people say David, it's much more boring. That's actually some of the data you see out of Canada and States in the United States.
You would be okay with your kids strolling into a cafe on a Friday afternoon for a bit of marijuana, like if they were in Amsterdam?
I wonder why you and David make it about my kids. Because I've got to tell you, I've got a law which makes it a crime for anyone to give cannabis to someone who's under 18.
Okay, so they're 19.
So, if people are 19, I think they should be able to make adult choices. And would you allow your 19-year-old child... What I find strange about the right, you often find the right in politics talk about personal liberty and the right to make choices and getting rid of big government.
And the Labor Party
then when I say we should change the law, so if somebody on a Friday afternoon, instead of wanting to go to a beer barn after a hard week, wants to go to a cannabis cafe and have a chilled out cannabis latte, you think the sky's going to fall down and you want the big police state to come and make it illegal.
Beer doesn't cause schizophrenia.
Be consistent.
I am being consistent. Beer doesn't cause schizophrenia.
Let me pick up on that, because, David, you make a really good point. The AMA have said that cannabis increases the likelihood of paranoia, memory loss, increased incidence of schizophrenia. Speak to that, because you really haven't addressed that. Are you not concerned about that?
So intensive cannabis use can, in a very small minority of users, produce that. That's happening already in an illegal market where people don't have access to labelling, don't have access to the kind of drug and alcohol rehabilitation you can get with billions of dollars of public revenue, and don't have clear information about where to go for treatment. Do you know why? Because they're buying it in an illegal market controlled by bikie gangs and criminal organisations.
Did you just argue that we'd use the tax revenue from cannabis to pay for rehab for people on cannabis?
That's exactly what he's arguing.
You may not realise this, James. There are already millions of Australians using cannabis, and you said some of them get schizophrenia. I'd like them to get treatment. I'd like money to give them treatment. You can get that with a cannabis tax.
So that makes absolutely no sense. You are feeding the dragon. You are feeding the dragon.
No,
you are telling people you've got to smoke pot so that we can fix you from your schizophrenia.
We started with the data that says there are already millions of Australians getting access to cannabis, and legalising cannabis barely moves the dial on the number of Australians who have cannabis. We started with that, David.
I'm sorry.
You can't just sort of ignore the last 5 minutes of debate and run back to your first stupid point.
Do you think, though, David, I've got to ask, and this is what David said, the United States has already done this. Germany recently became another country. Uruguay, Malta, Canada. Parts of the world are following this trend. I mean, is it inevitable that eventually Australia is going to go down that pathway? If it's happening around the world, why wouldn't Australia go down that path?
I just want to confirm, David, you want us to follow the American experience? Even after they vote for Trump?
Something
so
far
we're going to follow America in everything now, so we're going to legalise marijuana and then we'll support Trump.
Perhaps
That's what you're saying? Just because somebody else has done it, you know,
perhaps
we're
you
a
read the
sovereign
bill.
nation.
It's
Unlike
far
your political
closer.
party, we don't sign off
we're out of
sovereignty.
time.
We'll make our own
Says the party that loves AUKUS
David
and gives out hands over sovereignty of the United States. You love Trump.
I mean, this has gone on another pathway. We're now talking about Trump. We've gone from
except for when he does
Trump.
something.
Cannabis to Trump. I don't know how we went there, but we did. David Shoebridge,
David
Elliott, the Davids. We've got to leave it there.
It was David Elliott's
Thank you so much for joining us this evening. What a debate. How was that?
I actually really enjoyed that.
So did I. Absolutely.